What is going on, guys? Pineapple Sway here, and today I'm going to be talking about why I think Batman Beyond is the next game in the Arkham franchise and how I think it's going to be a direct sequel to Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. If you like what you see, please consider liking and subscribing, and let's get on with today's video. Now, I just wanted to give a quick shout out to all of the channel members on the channel for supporting the channel. Quick shout out to Andrew Brown, the Collector of Worlds, Tammy, Lance Fox 23, Unknown Name, Stixie, Reed Fletcher, Stretch, Clint Fortune, and Javerb. Without your support, none of this would be possible with the channel. But let's talk what I wanted to talk about today, and that is why I think, Batman Beyond is the next game in the Arkham franchise, and how they could possibly set this up and build this, since obviously I've talked about, what the ending means for Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, and how, it's a little confusing because there really isn't much there. It's really just based off complete interpretation. And I think a good way to possibly set up the next game is to obviously bring in a character like Terry McGinnis and make a Batman Beyond game. And you're probably wondering, well, how are they going to set it up? In a strange way, they've already teased it and set it up. And what I mean by this is the Suicide Squad prequel comic. They, for some reason, traveled into the future, into 2060 Neo Gotham. And the only explanation is, who is the Batman currently in that time. And that's obviously going to be Terry McGinnis. And one way I think that this is highly possible that they could set this up and build this is they take a play from the Justice League Unlimited storyline, where Amanda Waller clones Batman's DNA and basically has Terry to be Bruce Wayne's son. Now, in all honesty, how could they set this up? I really don't know. Something that makes a lot of sense is maybe, we all know how Amanda Waller at the end of the day is, a bad person, but, she respects Batman. That's apparent. So cloning his DNA and maybe trying to make an army of Batmans ends up failing, and instead she ends up just making Terry McGinnis. Now, since we all know that at the end of Kill the Justice League, she basically got Brainiac 13 to be a part of her new Task Force X, I can only assume that if they continue on with this storyline, that Brainiac 13 will obviously fail, and that'll lead to Waller going, to some desperate measures and trying to clone an army of Batmans. Since, they also mentioned too that, with the audio logs for Suicide Squad, Batman basically wants nothing to do with Waller, but, from the comics, from Justice League Unlimited, Waller, admires Batman and what he's able to do because he's human, and he's able to do some incredible things that basically seem virtually impossible. So why not clone him, and why not, use his DNA to make the next Batman to defend the city, or in her hopes to be her, puppet and to continue on. Now, that's just one possibility if they were to make it a direct sequel, and I would say keep it in the Arkham universe, otherwise known as Earth 1. Another possibility I thought of to introduce Terry McGinnis as Batman Beyond, and if you don't want it to no longer be in the Arkham universe, is to have maybe the Justice League, since we all know that they're traveling in Brainiac's ship, maybe they come across Terry McGinnis's universe where he is the Batman of the universe. They also explored this episode, or in an episode of Justice League Unlimited as well, where the Justice League met old Bruce Wayne and Terry and some other heroes as well. So that's another possibility. But just for the sake of the video, just assuming that they go into the future, we assume that Waller tries to clone Batman's DNA and tries to basically replicate what he is, and obviously making Terry McGinnis ultimately, Batman's son. Obviously, to add plot points to this, so it doesn't just feel like, Terry's Batman's son, he was cloned by Amanda Waller. Obviously, I would think a good introduction is to introduce none other than Blight into the universe and being the main villain, and sort of the power struggle of maybe Derek Powers takes over Wayne Tech. For the foreseeable future, maybe they could say that, in the universe, maybe Bruce Wayne is retired, he no longer wants to bother, being a part of Wayne Tech, and that's when Derek Powers swoops in and takes over. And, I could say, too, that, if became a conflict of, in the game, let's just say hypothetically, that, let's say Bruce Wayne gets upset with Waller for cloning his DNA, she could bring up the fact that, remember when basically Brainiac took over, the entire Justice League's free will, maybe it's a new precaution against superheroes. Maybe, she was cloning other superheroes as well, not just Batman's. And, it can set up an interesting plot point for the game, and maybe it has a connection with Wayne Tech, or Wayne Powers Tech, I think it would be called. And, still at the end of the day, having that villain in Blight, having Amanda Waller continue to be the villain, having them, connect, kill the Justice League, and not just sort of leaving this game to rot. And I would say sort of bring out its redeeming qualities. Maybe there's a new precaution against superheroes, maybe because of the events of Kill the Justice League. If they were to make a direct sequel, maybe there's, an outlaw against heroes, or, it's just a whole new system of precautions. Maybe Batman has invented new tech to prevent, less invasions from happening, less aliens coming into their atmosphere and just completely taking over and wiping out cities. I don't know, just small things to use that. And, maybe Waller was basically getting the League's DNA to clone them and stuff like that. I don't know. I'm just kind of throwing ideas at the wall, for you guys to think of something of how they could possibly, mesh these two games together and make a really good Batman Beyond sequel, a really convincing one at that. But, still keeping it in the Arkhamverse, still keeping it, directly after Kill the Justice League, and not just completely abandoning what has already been established, what has already been built in the Batman Arkham universe. And then there's, the scenario of, they just completely retcon this game. But, I don't think they will. And from what I've heard, it doesn't seem like it'll be retconned. It doesn't seem like this universe will get rebooted. So, I'm just throwing ideas at a wall. Let me know what you guys think, and how would you guys have them set up a Batman Beyond game. Anyways, though, this is Pineapple Sway. Peace out.